Hey guys, today feeling a little nervous. There's like a cool video for you about like production techniques necessary, very important principles and techniques that you should apply to your music, but I feel a little nervous. One thing that helps is new gear. As you know, I got a little gear addiction, and if I don't start the day by unboxing something, I just feel really bad. Today's unboxing is really boring, but better than nothing. Just a blue and another blue cable. Both of these are inputs. Inputs means I can connect more stuff. If I can connect more stuff, I can buy more stuff, satisfy my gear needs. You see, it's all making sense. It's all making sense. But now let's get to the main topic and talk about most important production techniques. Way more interesting instantly.
We're lost in the ashes. We're lost in the ashes.
First, we need to answer the following question. What is the thing in music production that creates the most excitement, tension, and makes a song instantly interesting? And for me, and probably you, it's definitely contrast. If there's one thing you learned today in today's video, it's have contrast in your music as much as possible. How do you create that contrast? Very simple. Let's take, for example, the typical EDM song. You have a break that has no kick in it, no very low information hitting you really hard. And then the song drops and you got kick and bass back in again, the entire low end. And this is a very simple effect you probably all know. If you, for example, listen to a song and cut away all of the high frequencies and listen to it for 30 seconds, your ear adapts to it, thinks that that's the normal, and if you then add the high frequencies back again, they overwhelm you. They feel a lot more than they actually are because your ear is kind of wired to what it heard for the last 30 seconds. That's the one thing you can kind of manipulate very easily as a music producer. So that kind of contrast equals impact in a big way. There are a lot of musical things you can do to achieve that. For example, playing chords on every bar and then in the drop kind of doubling them. You could also just speed something up. Like, these are the musical things. I don't want to concentrate on them. I want to concentrate on the more technical part. And for fully understanding it, there are like three main kind of dimensions in music making you have to understand. The first one is maybe the hardest to understand, but it's still easy. That's like the back and forth dimension. That's done usually with reverb. If something sounds dry, it sounds very close. If something sounds very in a room, very wet, very reverby, it sounds far away. So for example, if we listen to a drum loop and the clap or snare is entirely dry, that's done in trap a lot, it hits just so much harder. It's like right in your face, it's snappy, it's very present, not washed out. If you put reverb on top, it just fades more to the background. And that's something you can play with. Let someone listen to a snare with a lot of reverb, and then on the drop or in the next part, just cut the reverb. It's like an instant in your face. The snare will sound a lot louder, hit a lot harder, and just that contrast again between back and forth will make the listener very interested in that song, because your brain has to think there's something new and doesn't know what's going on. It can be a huge effect that just makes it pop. Simple, but very effective. I also know people that bounce out the vocal reverb, put it underneath on an audio track, and cut it at certain points. It's like a very dramatic effect, very interesting, just right before a drop, or like in a mini break where you take away the kick for a bar, and if you then cut the reverbs, there's like almost like entire silence, and then back in again. Love it. By the way, silence to not silence is like the most dramatic you can have. So if you're making a club track and have like a split second before the drop, just silence, the impact will be a lot harder. But let's get to the second technique, the second dimension of mixing, and that is just simply left, right. So we basically got left, right, we got center, mono, and we got wide, which is one of the two channels, left and right, delayed by a couple of milliseconds, close enough that your brain can't tell them really apart. That creates the illusion of something being wide and big. And I hear it in tons and tons of pop tracks. That, for example, the verse vocal is just mono in the middle. And then the chorus vocal is wide, huge, and big. Usually achieved by doubling the vocal, putting it left and right, different takes, harmonies, stacking them, just making a wall of vocals. But of course, this also works on snares and other drum bits, as well as any kind of synthesizer. I know some techno producers automate the width in the break of a song, so they make the synth very mono in the break, and then automate it and make it wide towards the drop and have it really wide on the drop, maybe even with an additional layer filling out the center again. That also creates a very wide, big soundstage and gives you that contrast between narrow and wide. And if you listen to something narrow for half a minute and then something wide, it appears even wider. Quick example again, just with like the simple drum loop and the snare. And the third thing, the third dimension you can misuse to create contrast and make it interesting for your listener is the frequency range. 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. You can, like, I think most people have a natural understanding for that. You just, for example, a DJ in the club kind of cuts away the low frequencies for 4 bars and drops the kick back in. It's the most simplest effect on the planet. But that new kick hits harder than if you wouldn't like take it away. It's like, it's so simple. It just always works. Having things bounce in and out creates so much contrast, especially if they have like different frequencies, different slots in the song. It makes it so much more interesting, and it's like an instant, like I love these things. If I listen to music, I know it's simple. It's like a simple technique, but it's very effective. Maybe one more like last bonus tip, if you will. You can also make things more interesting in a time manner, not having them play throughout the entire song. I get a lot of demos. They sound just like an extended 8-bar loop with like 5-6 elements running throughout the entire time. That is just so boring. Have change, contrast, different stuff in there, make things pop in, pop out, even a bass line. Like if we play it 16th notes, 8 notes, it's kind of boring because it's just like blah, 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 blah. You could just make it play sometimes within that bar, like a funk bass that actually lives from the space in between, which creates a lot more groove, and every single bass note will hit harder and will be more interesting because there is less of it. Sometimes less is more, and if you have less of each and every element and all of them interconnected in a mesh that is interesting, and call and response, things popping in and out and there, using certain gaps in the song that are empty to fill them with something interesting, creating gaps to have again the contrast between nothing and a lot. That's kind of what excites me about music. So think about it, use these 3 plus the bonus tip, and I think you'll have an instantly better song that is more interesting for the listener. Let me know about your top favorite techniques to make your songs more interesting. I'd add maybe automation and ear candy. That also always really helps. And that's it. That's pretty much it. Today I'm working on a song I can't share. Usually I share my working progress right here in the studio. And also sometimes I talk about my gear and my gear addiction. I made space right there for another synthesizer. It should arrive tomorrow. It's the most epic piece of equipment I ever got. So definitely tune in.